Jesus said, "If any man is willing to do his will, he shall know of the teaching, whether it is of God, or whether I speak from myself." So to be able to understand the truth we must be willing to obey it. According to what Jesus said, we must not only believe, but be willing to obey him in order to know whether his teachings were from God. We have to see the Lord's glory with an unveiled face to be changed into his image. Our own prejudices, our good or bad experiences, can be veils that cause us to distort his teachings. You will not make it through this place without seeing the one who lives in you. Seeing the Lord and abiding in him was no longer just an option, but it would mean life or death. Is not having the Holy Spirit living in you as your helper even greater? I was given this honor to represent all of the prophets and righteous ones who helped to prepare the way for the Lord, but you have one greater than all of us with you always. Seeing the one who lives in you is much greater than seeing me. You must not be so distracted by those who bring you the words of the Lord that you do not see the Word himself and follow him. Even so, you are special. These are special times, and those who have been chosen to live in them are special. All who have walked this path are special, but to walk it in these times is one of the greatest honors there will ever be. Elijah said, "I was sent by the king." Then Elijah motioned for us to begin walking, saying, "It is important for you to make as much progress as you can when you have light. You must keep moving. It is written that he has called us into fellowship with the Son, so he wants to have this kind of relationship with all of his people. It seems our failure to fulfill the Great Commission has robbed many of this. Our commission is to make disciples, not just converts. A disciple is a student. However, biblical discipleship is much more than being a student. A disciple is to have a single-minded purpose of learning from their master and becoming like their master. This should be the single most important devotion of our life, our first thought in the morning and our last thought before sleep. What you are talking about is not popular. Well, I guess it is a good thing that I never had the goal of being popular. My goal has been to know the Lord and be known by him. I don't think there could be anything worse than having spent a life laboring for him and then hear on that great judgment day that he never knew us. It implies having an intimate knowledge of another such as a husband and wife would have of each other. You are going to the mountain of the Lord, that is, his kingdom, but the kingdom is already in your midst. The kingdom is his domain. As you learn to live in his domain, you will be more at home there than you have ever been anywhere. When you get to the mountain, you will be coming home. That's because the kingdom is where the king is, and he is your home just as you are his. I thought about how many times I had taught this, maybe even using the same words, but listening to Elijah share them was like me hearing them for the first time. I was as captivated as anyone. His words did not just teach you how to know the Lord, but they made you want to know him more than anything else. When I looked up, he was looking at me as if he was listening to my thoughts again. "Please share what you are thinking," Elijah said to me. I was thinking about how many times I have said what you just said. But when you said it, there was a life and power that compelled and drew you to pursue the Lord, I answered. "Do you know why?" Elijah asked. "I think it is because you are sharing words that are spirit and life, because they are your life," I answered. Truth that is life is truth that is lived. As you live what you learn, your words will have the power of life. You will not just teach the truth, but you will impart a love for the truth when it is your life. When the Baptist preached, he drew all Judea out to him. They did not come to see him because of how he dressed, or because he used powerful and beautiful words. They did not come out to him because of who he was, because they did not know who he was. They came because of the anointing. He had words of life that would lead to the path of life, the same path you are now on. You are not here just to learn the truth, but to live the truth. Then your words will do the same as John's, compel men to follow the Lord. This is how you must prepare the way for the Lord. When the Lord told his disciples about the signs of the end of the age, he said, "Woe to those who nurse babes in those days." He was speaking literally, but as you have interpreted this as woe to those who keep their people in immaturity, this is also true. They are still immature when they only want to learn things that are about themselves. There is a lot of teaching today that keeps people self-centered rather than Christ-centered. This keeps them in immaturity. You must all come to know the teacher's voice, regardless of how he speaks or who he speaks through. Obviously, many of you have, at least, begun to learn this. But this is just the beginning. You must also learn to obey him. To obey him almost always requires risk and the disregard for self-interest. You would not be here if you were not learning this, but more than seeking to die to your own interests, you must seek the interests of Christ. Then your own selfish interests will begin to seem as small and petty as they are. The three things you are doing are the greatest threats to the enemy, and they are like the cord of three strands that can bind you together so that your unity cannot be broken. This is what you must have to make it to the mountain. Knowing the voice of the Lord, obeying him, and dwelling in his presence. Seal these three things in your heart, Elijah replied. Resolve each day to get to know his voice better, to do his will, and to abide in him. These will keep you, and they will lead you to the kingdom. The enemy is constantly prowling around you seeking someone to devour. You have to learn this, or you will not make it, Elijah replied. You are in the will of the Lord, and there is no safer place than being in his will. The lion who is with you is much greater than those who are seeking to devour you. You must see the lion who is in you, and you must, above all things, follow him. You must not fear the lions that are seeking to destroy you, but you must resolve to make them fear you because of the one you abide in. That is the only safe place you can be. Everything that can be shaken is being shaken. Only the kingdom cannot be shaken. Those who are not in pursuit of the kingdom will be in increasing danger every day. Right now you are in the safest place you could be in this world. The first generation that left Egypt all perished in the wilderness. Their account is written for us so that the same does not have to happen to us. This journey is meant to be hard, and it is meant to be dangerous to prepare us for what we are called to, but we are not called to perish here. We must know the Lord, know his voice, and obey him in all things in order to make it. We must stay so close to him that he is never out of our sight. We must learn to abide in the manifest presence of the Lord. If we ever lose that, we must stop and find him. His presence is even more vital to us than this water. That is why he allows those lions to roam here. They are for our sake, they drive us to the Lord. The whole world depends on him for life, in whom we live and move and have our being, and here that is made real to us. We can't make it a single day without him. We are here to learn this. The whole world is about to learn this, and we will be sent to the world with that message. This is the gospel of the kingdom that must be preached throughout the world. This message will not go forth in just words, but in power, the power of those who live it. The knowledge of his ways is more valuable than any earthly treasure. He is the way, the truth, and the life. For a truth to become life, it must be applied to our life. The word says that the ways of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. He does order our steps to help turn what he is teaching us into life. We are promised in his word that all who seek, find, and all who ask, receive. A more accurate translation would be that all who keep seeking find, and all who keep asking receive. The quest for these treasures of the knowledge of his ways is one of the greatest adventures you can know in this life, to a large degree because he adds to it the experience of the truth. Only those who care enough to continue the pursuit of these treasures will find them. Those who care that much for them will likely be careful enough to handle them rightly. It is like any earthly fortune. Those who do not have the experience of building a fortune will not have the wisdom to keep it. Those who do not have the experience of searching out his treasures of wisdom and knowledge will not care enough to keep them or live them. Even so, the greatest treasure of all will be the fellowship we have with him when he becomes our teacher. He is called the Helper who was sent to be our guide, not the doer. He is gentle and humble of heart. He is gentle in the way he guides us. For this reason, we must stay sensitive to recognize his guidance and even his correction. He may use dramatic ways to get our attention as we learned yesterday with the lion, but that tends to be the exception, not the rule. I cannot imagine life being more wonderful than getting to know him and serving him. It is written that God is love, and I learned that you could not learn anything about him without loving him more. That compels you to learn more about him so that you get caught up in an ever-tightening and ascending life spiral that gets stronger and stronger. I call this the great addiction that every other addiction is a counterfeit of. There is nothing that will ever satisfy the human soul like knowing God. Once you start to know him, you just cannot get to know him enough. To this I will attest, said Elijah, who had joined our company without being noticed. I have seen the glories of earth and heaven. The glories of heaven overshadow the greatest glories of earth more than can be conveyed, but the glory of God overshadows the glory of heaven even more so. I have sat in the great councils of heaven. The greatest of all marvels is how the Lord shares his glory with men, and how he intends to dwell on the earth among men. His love for man is more than anyone has yet comprehended. To know this is the greatest knowledge of all, this is the greatest treasure of all. The highest pursuit of all is to know him. The Lord built his first dwelling place among men in the wilderness with the children of Israel. It is here that he is building his dwelling place among us. He is with us. He loves us. He is with us all the time. Being with him in his presence is like nothing else. This is what we were made for, to dwell with him, to know his special fellowship. He is a quickening spirit who will quicken our mortal bodies. That was what King David called the sweet fellowship they experienced in the house of the Lord. There is nothing else like it. That is why David had to have the ark with him in Jerusalem. You must go through a wilderness to get to the promised land, and that wilderness is usually the exact opposite of what you've been promised. He is in relentless pursuit of a bride, but, to date she seems to have little or no time for him. So far, it is the greatest of all tragedies, but we know it will have the most wonderful of all endings. He will have the bride that he is so worthy of. His suffering did not end on the cross. He still intercedes for us because he still feels for our suffering, and it hurts him. However, I don't think this will end until we see and are touched by his suffering and devote ourselves to seeing the bride that he is so worthy of make herself ready for him, and they are united. Then, the end of all suffering can come, and the new age in which his kingdom comes will begin. Spiritual maturity begins when we stop being self-focused and begin to focus on serving the Lord and helping others. Advancement in the kingdom comes by becoming greater servants of others. We were created for his pleasure, and nothing will ever satisfy our own souls like fulfilling this purpose. To spend a lifetime just to bring him joy for a single moment would be a life well lived, but we can bring him joy every day. What do we have to do that is more important than that? The repetitious cycles of history are tragic. Mankind has made impressive progress in many ways, but in some of the most basic, the most important issues of all, we do not seem to have learned much. We keep repeating the same mistakes. The church has been just as guilty of this as the rest of the world. Every spiritual generation tends to make the same mistakes as the previous generations. It's a combination of things, but I think the most prevailing reason is pride. The core of this pride causes every generation to think that they are better than the last one. We tend to think we are smarter, wiser, and definitely not like our parents, and this keeps us in the trap. As we grow older, we become just like our parents, or out of the reaction to our parents and trying to be different from them, we become even more shallow shells of who we could be. Reactions to the problems of our parents, or anyone else, will not get us free of this trap. Only repentance, and the humility that would enable us to be teachable, will get us free. The Lord gave us the answer to this dilemma when he gave the law to Moses and commanded us to honor our fathers and mothers. He did not say honor the great ones, or even just the good ones, but whatever parents we got. I think if our mindset was to honor those who have gone before us instead of disregarding them, we could even learn so much from the bad ones that our progress could be multiplied. Alex Haley once said that when an old person dies it's like a library burning down. That our elders are not listened to, that we do not try to learn all that we can from those who have been this way before, is one of our greatest mistakes, and the reason why we repeat the great mistakes of history over and over. The great teachings and great truths can become common, but it is rare to find anyone who has been changed by the truth. Multitudes can quote the great teachings of the faith, but it is rare to find those who are living them. I think humility must be mixed with the truth in order for it to change us. God commanded Israel to repeat their history every year. This was not to get them to live in the past, yet we cannot deal with the present or the future as we should if we forget the lessons of the past. Not respecting the past enough to study it is probably the main cause that so many empires have risen, through all that it takes to build such a thing, only to quickly disintegrate for the lack of a simple, basic, understanding. The command to honor our fathers and mothers is the only commandment with a promise. It is found in both the Old and New Testaments. The promise is that it will go well with us, and we will live long in the land that the Lord has given us.